Hello, my friends. My name is Michael C. Welcome to 12 Step Spirituality. I'm with my compadre. I'll bring him out momentarily. Adam G. Conversation today is Step 11, Living in the Pause. And the conversation will be around coming into a new awareness. So let me go back and get my friend now, and we will get right at it. Hi, Adam. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well today. Busy day, and this kind of caught up on me, but gosh, I'm always glad to be in conversation with you. So,
Well, it's good to. I'm glad we didn't wait so long this time. We were just in step 10 last week. We're going to pick up where we left off. You and I had a conversation before the conversation yesterday, and I heard you're going to go rogue on me today, and
yes.
you're speaking from the soul. So I'm going to step back and let you get us started.
Well, thanks, Michael. Well, after we had our conversation, I kind of stepped back to think a little bit about step 11. And I thought the context of how I came to step 11 was interesting. And then I remembered an article that I had read. And uh, the article is called One Man's View, written by Bill Wilson when he was 23 years sober. And just remember that. I'm going to return to that later, but he's 23 years sober, coming up on his 24th anniversary when he wrote this article. And I read it and kind of changed the trajectory for me. So, what he wrote was, when it comes to the practice of AA's Step 11, I'm sure I am still very much in the beginner's class. I'm almost a case of arrested development. Now, remember, he's writing this 23 years sober, right? And then he goes on to talk about everything that he's doing. And he talks about, here's what I do in the first step. And he goes all the way through, and he goes through all the steps, skips 11, and then talks about all the 12-step work he's doing. And then he says, this little sketch of my own pilgrim's progress is offered to illustrate where I, and maybe lots of other AAs, have still been missing something of top importance. Many of us keep ourselves year after year in rather easy a spiritual kindergarten, but almost inevitably we become dissatisfied. We have to admit we have hit an uncomfortable and maybe a very painful sticking point. And he goes on to say, our bright-eyed friends tell us how well we're doing, but inside we know better. We know we aren't doing well enough. We still can't handle life as life is. There must be a serious flaw somewhere in our spiritual practice and development. And his conclusion, and he goes on to talk quite a bit more about this, is the chances are better than even that we shall locate our trouble in our misunderstanding or neglect of AA's Step 11, prayer, meditation, and the guidance of God. The other steps can keep most of us sober and somehow functioning, but Step 11 can keep us growing. So remember, I said that he wrote that when he was 23 years sober. Well, I came to it when I was almost 23 years sober. And part of that just had that impact on me. I was like, oh my God, he wrote this, and that's where I was. Last week, we talked about how you started meditation almost out of the gate, but it took me over 2 decades to really pay attention to Step 11. And I really was in a spiritual kindergarten. I didn't know it. And life, I couldn't handle as life was on life's terms. So when I read this, I knew this was a call to me to investigate this. And this happened, well, a number of years ago now, 15 years ago now. But I was decades into recovery, and I had completely neglected the 11th step. So.
Wow. Wow. I'm glad you didn't tell me that you were going there, because I've had absolutely no opportunity to think about what I'm going to say. And so, my soul's open, and what came out as you were walking me through it, I just started reminiscing uh, over the years. And there was a piece of this in step 11, and I remember that my spiritual teacher at the time continued to prod. Uh, I was praying a lot because I was scared, and this was in early recovery. I think I told you that I started to stumble in centering prayer relatively early, but that first 2 years it was pray, 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 right, 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 right. I mean, that was all my step 11 time, and then I would check in with the teacher once or twice a week, and she continued to say, Michael, at some point, consider adding meditation, and she talked about what that was. And I said, okay, I'll try. And I put all of about 10, 15 seconds into it a few times. And, like most people on ramping it, I didn't like it. It felt, it's like, well, I'm not doing anything. And that's what she was pointing to. And I think with Bill Wilson, because I see a lot of people like yourself coming into centering prayer, contemplative spirituality, and they've been praying, they've been doing step 11, but you kind of what we need to take us where we want to go. We need to do something else and add something to it. It's something like, whatever got you to where you are, it's not going to get you to where you want to go. That's why we're bumping into that, and that was a real big pivot for me, is to just take the time and with patience and prayer begin to get some experience of what it meant to, listen to God, listen to my higher power. So that's what came up in me as I was listening to your talk on Bill Wilson's writing after 23 years.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'll go a little bit more back on script, because you and I talked yesterday, and it led to yet another one of our great conversations.
Yeah, you had
and
you dropped a bomb on me yesterday, kind of like a God bomb. You read step 11 and said that what moved you most was the idea of conscious contact, but the intention was to improve conscious contact, and through prayer, meditation. But then you had this extraordinary your understanding of what that meant today after being in it, and it blew the sides off of my God box.
Yeah. Well, as with all good ideas, it's not mine, but it came out of something that Saint Teresa of Avila wrote, which is, all difficulties in prayer can be traced to one cause: praying as if God were absent. And this idea that I was separate from the God of my understanding was persistent and enduring well into recovery. And what I came to realize what conscious contact was, and what improving conscious contact was bringing to my awareness that I was not separate. Bringing to my awareness that I was not separate from my higher power. And for me, and what I laid out was my evolution. How did I get there in recovery? At first, my experience of a higher power was mediated. I grew up in the church, and there was always someone or something that was required between me and God in order to connect, in order to have a God feeling. That person for me was a priest. For others, it's a pastor, a rabbi, a imam, a Zen master, it doesn't matter. And it generally required a place. So I went to church, others go to synagogue or the mosque or the temple, it doesn't matter. But I gave you the example, and I'll step back here in a second so people can see. I once asked my priest, why does he stand like this? With his hands like that when we're praying. And because how do we stand when we pray, Michael? Well, when we pray, we're doing this, right? So my question was, well, why aren't you standing that way? And he said, well, I am gathering and reflecting the prayers of the congregation upwards to God. And I'm receiving God's grace and transmitting it out. And even as he said it, I don't know that he was fully subscribed to it, but that's what was going on. And I can't think of a better description of being separate from the God of my understanding than actually needing an intermediary to be the person who, but this is what I'd grown up with. Didn't seem wrong to me. I had a lot of great experiences in the church, but I had a sense that I was separate from, the God of my understanding. I would say that being in church underscored in a way my separateness. So then I come to AA and I start to have a new experience of a higher power. And that experience now is part of a collective. And Bill Wilson's words were, the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. He goes on to say that wouldn't in and of itself be enough, but I would have that feeling. I would go to a meeting. I would feel something else, that there was a power other than me in that room. And I started to see that collective expression of higher power is also what I had been finding in church, whether we were praying together, worshiping together, walking to the front of the church together, singing together. That was also what I really relied on to have an experience of a higher power. And that kind of got brightened for me and focused for me at 12-step meetings. But I'm going to say the connection was still dependent on factors outside of me at that point. And then I read Bill Wilson's reading, and I started meditating, and I was eventually led to centering prayer. So what does Bill say in We Agnostics? He said, we found the great reality deep down within us. What does Father Keating say? We experience God's presence within us, closer than breathing, closer than thinking, closer than consciousness itself. So now I had this kind of revolutionary idea that came to me out of a practice. Someone didn't have to tell me this. I had this experience that I could be in relationship with my higher power in a personal, intimate way. Nothing between me and God. No worship service, no priest, no sermon, no prayer even. Just silence and presence. And they talk about the divine indwelling. It is within us. We talk about God's love and action within. It is within us. It's not over there and it's not up there. It's within us. This was a radical idea. And the idea that I had a very practical method to tap into this unsuspected inner resource was kind of a miracle of my third decade in this program, right? That I now get to have this new kind of relationship with the God of my understanding. And the end result of all of this, and I'll turn it back to you, is now I start to be able to live life on life's terms. I start to be able to continue growing in the ways that matter. I don't feel stopped and stuck again like I did at 22 years, wondering why am I still restless, irritable, and discontent? I'm doing all these things. Well, I wasn't connecting with the God of my understanding. And part of it was I thought I was separate. So that's been my evolution to really coming to the awareness that I am not separate from the God of my understanding. And that is the powerful upshot of centering prayer.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it as I was listening to you, it kind of take us all on that ride. All the dots started coming, like from the reading, Bill's reading of, and the last word you use is evolution, our growth, as we grow into stages, whatever you want to call it, spiritual maturity, awareness that, it's at first, once upon a time, I did need, I'm going to call it a middle person, a liaison. I go to this person listens, this person uploads to wherever, and then, supposedly wherever downloads to this person gives to me. And I'm not putting it down. There are times where I can be in that environment and be moved. And then when I got into recovery, I remember somebody saying, God, group of drunks, and sitting in the rooms and having, over the years, many, many, many definable moments where the right person said the right few words at the right time, and the trajectory is changed in me. All of a sudden, 10 minutes ago I came in crazy, and all of a sudden I'm there. But not, and after a while, that ultimate is the waking up, where however we wake up, that there's something in me that's greater than me, and that something is presence, divine presence. And it, I say it now, it's always been there. What hadn't been there is my knowing it, and any intention in giving more of my attention to it, being in communion with it, and that experience. And it's very personal. It's very, it's why we go on retreats. It's as you know, I'm an early riser. I'll be in bed at 8 o'clock at night, and be by myself with a candle at 2 o'clock in the morning, in that very intimate, individual, and stay there a while. And sometimes I'm there until the world wakes up. And when the dog's barking and Mary's up, it's like, okay, it's time to go to the world. But I saw my own evolution in that which you took us on. So, and I think it gives people that we're talking to now, I call it, we're pointing to something, just like I've had you and people in my life that would point to something, and I would go, oh, I see that. Yes. Well, why are you so stoked if you know it? I never heard it put into words. No one ever gave me a context, so that when I go back to that, I can be a little bit more intentional in my practice.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I want to be clear too. I'm not saying that, I now I still attend church every week. But I have a different experience there. I'm now, the God in me is praying with the God in you. The God in me is worshiping or singing or whatever with the God in you. In all my relationships, the God in me is loving the God in you. Like, this is a different way of being. And I was told to abandon myself to God as I understand God. How can I really abandon? We talked about this idea. How can I give myself over if I don't know what I'm giving myself over to? But what if what I'm giving myself over to is within me? And now I don't have to hand me over, right? Instead, I need to bring all of me, which includes the God of my understanding, to all of my interactions. And it has deepened my experience and my understanding of what happens when I'm in church, when I'm in a meeting, or when I'm sitting in that chair. So I just want to make sure that the message today isn't, you don't need that stuff.
Yeah, no. Well, it to me it loops it, because the farthest most distant, that God of my understanding, that's supposedly farther most distant. And I was raised with God is out there in heaven somewhere, but the farthest most distance is nearest most present. And both, but I don't have to go way out there to become aware. I'm a carrier of that sacredness, and to the degree that my attention is on that awareness, not the presence. The presence is always there, 24/7, 365. What isn't there for me is my attention being surrendered to it, and my experience, it changes. And it's changing. I don't know it. I told you over the years, the real payoff for me isn't when I'm in a prayer chair centering per se. It's something happens as a result of that later on. I call it the unchanging newness, a new thought, a new perspective, a new idea, and it serves the greater good of everyone. And you go, well, prove it. Well, I can't. It's, welcome to faith. All I know is it works, and I'm 100% dependent on what I just shared.
Right. Right. And this new awareness, this is what's referred to in the spiritual experience as, what is sufficient to bring about recovery. Well, it's not only just, as you and I know, stopping the drinking and removing the cravings, but it's sufficient to bring about wholeness, happiness, connection, and that's the real gift of conscious contact and practicing conscious contact. Remember what comes before those words: sought through prayer and meditation, sought through these entirely practical methods to do this thing that sounds mysterious, distant, far away, but no. This new awareness is, I'm not separate anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I'll end mine by just saying, in a meeting last night, heard something and embraced it. And I kind of personalized it. I no longer am of me, but the divine that resides in me, that works through, and that to the degree that I cannot identify, me now is my acronym for mind and ego. The twins that always to dance and I can be enslaved to, but by the grace of my higher power, I'm identifying a little bit less with me and more with that which is in me, which is sacred. And to the degree I do that, I don't get myself in as much trouble. So, it's all good. So anyway, we're out of time. Tell me we're going to come back next week and take on step 12.
We're going to come back next week and take on step 12.
All right, my friend. Well, it's always nice to see you. And our community is growing on 12-Step Spirituality. It's a beautiful thing. We've got some beautiful comments of people that have been listening, so I know that you'll read the feed as well. So thank you very much. Love you a lot, and I'll see you next week to pick up on step 12.
Love you, Michael.
Love you too, bud.